TYCOON abandoned his wife, leaving her homeless with their 3 children on Christmas Eve. The snow had begun to fall softly outside the modest apartment window, each flake landing like a whisper of hope. The world beyond was silent, wrapped in a winter hush that made the ticking clock in the living room sound louder than ever. A small, humble tree stood in the corner, barely 4 feet tall, with handmade ornaments dangling delicately from its thin branches. The soft yellow glow of the fairy lights gave the room a warmth that didn't quite match the chill lingering in the air. Inside, Hannah paced slowly across the worn wooden floor, glancing at the clock every few seconds. Her eyes were tired, rimmed red from exhaustion and a restlessness she couldn't explain. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded a blanket over her youngest son, Minjun, who had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching a small stuffed bear with one eye missing. Beside him sat his older siblings, Jiho and Aryam, both trying to stay awake, though their eyelids were heavy. "Mom, is Appa coming soon?" Jiho asked, his voice quiet, uncertain. Hannah knelt beside him and brushed his hair from his forehead, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He promised, didn't he?" she said softly. "He said he would be home for Christmas Eve. Just a little more time, baby." Jiho nodded and leaned into her. Aryam, barely 6 years old, sat cross-legged with a plate of cookies untouched in front of her, looking at the door with wide, expectant eyes. "I saved the star for him," she whispered, "so he can put it on the tree." Hannah's throat tightened. She had told herself not to cry tonight. Not tonight. She had held it in all week. Every time he didn't answer her calls, every time his secretary said he was in meetings, every time the kids asked about him and she had to invent another excuse. But now the hour hand struck 10, and still no call, no text, no mijo. She stood up, went to the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water to still her nerves. Her fingers trembled around the glass. Her gaze moved to the calendar on the wall. One day circled in red: December 24th. Not just Christmas Eve. It was also the day Miho had proposed to her years ago, on a snowy hill not far from where they lived now. She had said yes, breathless and in love, believing that his dreams could include her, that his ambitions would never replace the warmth of family. She was wrong. The apartment was quiet again, too quiet. Hannah set the glass down and returned to the living room. The fireplace flickered, barely giving off heat. She picked up her phone and stared at the screen. Still no message. No missed call. Just silence. "Maybe he's bringing a big surprise," Aryam said suddenly, breaking the heavy air with innocent hope. "Maybe he's buying us a puppy." Hannah looked at her daughter and smiled faintly, blinking away tears before they could fall. "Maybe," she whispered, kneeling to hug her. But deep inside, a coldness had started to grow. A coldness far worse than the snow outside. Miho had changed. She felt it in the way he looked through her lately, not at her. In the way he stopped asking about the children. The way he no longer touched her hand when he walked by. And worst of all, in the way he now came home only after they were all asleep. If at all. A knock on the door broke her thoughts. Her heart leapt. For a moment, a flicker of joy lit her face as she hurried toward the door, brushing her hair behind her ears, straightening her sweater. She opened it. But it wasn't Miho. It was the building manager, holding a letter in a sealed envelope. "Mrs. Seo," he said with a sympathetic tone. "This just came for you. It's from Mr. Seo." She took the envelope, hands shaking. Her name was written in his handwriting, sharp, rushed, almost indifferent. "Thank you," she muttered, closing the door slowly. The children were watching her now, wide-eyed. She walked to the kitchen table and opened the letter. And with each line she read, her soul crumbled. "Hannah, I'm sorry to do this like this, but I can't keep pretending. I've moved out. There is no us anymore. You and the kids will need to find somewhere else to stay by tomorrow. I've left some money. Don't contact me. I hope you find peace someday." Miho, she stared at the words for a long moment. The room spun. The paper trembled in her hands. Her knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. Jiho walked over to her, "Mom, what did Appa say?" She couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Ariam came next, wrapping her arms around Hannah's waist. Is he coming?" And still she said nothing. Instead, she bent down, hugged both children tightly, and sobbed silent, trembling sobs she could no longer contain. Her shoulders shook as the storm broke within her, more violent than any blizzard outside. Minjun woke up and toddled over, confused and half asleep. "Amma," he whispered. She pulled him in too, held all three of them in her arms as if trying to shield them from the breaking world. The clock struck midnight. Christmas had arrived, but there were no gifts, no father, no warmth, only snow falling steadily outside. Only three children pressing close to a mother who had just been left utterly, cruelly alone. And yet, as Hannah looked at their faces, tear-streaked, trusting, small, something inside her stirred. It wasn't strength. Not yet. It wasn't hope either. It was something rawer. A quiet, searing refusal to fall. They had no home anymore. No protector. No safety net. But they had each other. And tonight, that would have to be enough. Se desejar. Posso continuar com o próximo tópico como uma novicina caia de moco. Deseja que eu siga você descerto? Agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a história sem marcacos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Me conte sobre o tópico tu com dialogo como su, faço espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita moco, com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters o ChatGPT dice. The wind howled across the hillside, whipping the ends of her scarf as Hannah laughed breathlessly, cheeks flushed with cold and happiness. Miho chased after her, his overcoat flapping behind him, his hair tousled by the late autumn breeze. They were young then, barely into their 20s, when dreams still felt reachable, and the future was a glowing path lined with promises. They tumbled onto the grass near the edge of the cliff, the city lights glittering below like stars spilled onto the earth. He looked at her with a grin that melted into something softer, more serious. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. Miho opened it, revealing a simple silver ring. No diamonds, no fanfare. Just a ring, he said, reminded him of her, not flashy, but strong. Real. "Hannah," he whispered, the moonlight catching in his eyes. "I can't imagine a life without you in it. You make me feel like, even if I have nothing, I have enough. Will you marry me?" She had said yes through tears, throwing her arms around him, nearly knocking the ring from his hand. They kissed with trembling smiles, wrapped in a silence too deep for words. That night, they promised to build a future together. Not one of riches or mansions, but one built on laughter, children, shared cups of coffee in the morning, and gentle hands holding each other in the dark. But time is cruel. Dreams bend, twist, fade, especially when one dream grows louder than the others. Miho had always wanted more than what he was born into, more than what others thought he could achieve. He studied obsessively, worked late into the night even before he graduated. While Hannah took teaching jobs to keep them afloat, he built a network, took internships, clawed his way into the world of finance. She believed in him, every step, even when he missed their first wedding anniversary because of a last-minute conference, even when he forgot her birthday 2 years in a row, even when he laughed off the idea of a second child, until she surprised him with the news of their twins. She stood by him, because love, she thought, meant understanding, patience, sacrifice. But each time he rose higher, it seemed he brought less of himself home. The suits got more expensive, the smiles more practiced, the warmth in his eyes slowly replaced by calculation. She remembered the night everything changed, not in some dramatic explosion, but in the quiet erosion of something sacred. They were sitting at dinner, the kids already asleep. She had prepared his favorite, braised beef with sweet soy glaze, and lit a candle between them, something small, just to remember who they used to be. But Miho never looked up from his phone. "Did you see the stock jump today?" he said, chewing without tasting. "That deal with the Hong Group pushed us ahead of projection." She reached for his hand across the table. "I miss you," she said softly. He paused for a second, then gently pulled his hand back to sip his wine. "We're doing all this for the future, Hannah. You know that." "No," she whispered. "You're doing it for your future. I don't recognize myself anymore. Or us." He looked up then, eyes cool and composed. "I didn't marry you to stay poor forever." The words weren't cruel, not in tone, but they cut deeper than a scream. Hannah blinked, stunned. "You married me because you loved me, didn't you?" He didn't answer. That silence spoke louder than anything. It was the same silence that began filling the house in the months that followed. The same silence she walked through every evening when she came home to a husband who was already gone. Or worse, present in body, but distant in soul. Still, she held on. Because of the children. Because she remembered the boy on the hill, who looked at her like she was enough. Because she thought maybe, just maybe, if she tried harder, loved deeper, stayed longer, she could find him again beneath the layers of cold success and steel ambition. She tried dressing up for him, wearing perfume he used to love, packing handwritten notes in his briefcase. But he stopped reading them. He started locking his phone, working later, smiling at messages he wouldn't show her. One night, while folding laundry, she caught sight of a lipstick stain on his collar. It was a color she didn't own. She stood there, holding the shirt in her hands, the children's laughter echoing from the other room. Her heart beat so hard she thought it might tear through her ribs. Still, she didn't confront him. She wasn't ready. She wasn't ready to admit that the man she married had already left. Emotionally, spiritually. Long before the cruel letter, he would leave her on Christmas Eve. Instead, she sat by the window that night, watching the snowfall, hugging herself tightly, tears running down her cheeks. The kids were asleep. The silence in the house was deafening. She whispered to herself, "Where did we go wrong?" But deep down, she knew, they had started as a partnership of hearts. But somewhere along the climb, Miho had chosen power over presence. Prestige over love, applause over laughter. She had loved him when they had nothing. He had abandoned her when he had everything. And yet, despite the hurt, despite the slow breaking of her heart, she had stayed. Because the love she gave wasn't conditional. It wasn't for show. It wasn't based on success. She stayed because that's what love meant to her. But Miho had redefined it for himself. And soon, she would learn that his final definition of love did not include her at all. Not her, not their children, not the promises whispered on a snowy hill. Still, she watched. She watched how his voice changed when he answered unknown calls. Softer, amused, almost flirtatious. She watched how his suits started to smell of perfume she didn't wear. And she noticed, most of all, the way his eyes no longer paused on her when he came home. It was as if she had become part of the furniture. Something permanent, quiet, and overlooked. One morning, Hannah stood by the window, folding the children's clothes. It was snowing again. The twins were playing in the living room, their giggles filling the air like sunlight through frosted glass. But her heart sat heavily in her chest. Miho had left earlier than usual, with a single word, meeting. No kiss, no glance. Not even a good morning. She stared out the window as his black car disappeared down the street. Something in her stomach twisted. That night, after she'd put the kids to bed and washed the last dish, she stood alone in the kitchen, hands resting on the sink. The apartment was dark except for the dim light over the stove. She waited. The clock struck 10, then 11, midnight. She finally sat down, her fingers tracing circles on the wooden table. At 12:43 a.m., the door clicked. Miho entered, removing his coat with mechanical movements. He looked exhausted, but not physically. There was a strange stillness in his face, like a man who had already decided something and didn't intend to look back. "You're late," Hannah said quietly. He didn't respond, just walked past her toward the bedroom. She stood, following him. "Miho," she said again, her voice firmer. He turned halfway, not meeting her gaze. "I told you, I had meetings." At almost 1 a.m., she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is that what we are now, a company memo?" he sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Not tonight, Hannah. Please." "No," she said, stepping closer. "Tonight, because every other night you disappear a little more. And I'm tired of pretending I don't notice." Finally, he looked at her. There was no anger in his eyes, just indifference, a stranger's kind of distance. "We've grown apart," he said simply. She blinked. "That's it. What do you want me to say?" "That you still love me," she whispered. "That you'll fight for this." He hesitated, and that hesitation sliced through her like a blade. "I'm not the same person I was," he said after a moment. "I've changed. We both have." "No," she replied, voice cracking. "You changed. I waited." His jaw tightened. "I gave everything to this family," she went on, the pain finally rising to her throat. "I gave up dreams I barely had time to form. I raised our children while you built your empire. I stood by you, even when it hurt. And now, I don't even get the decency of honesty." Miho walked to the closet and pulled out an overnight bag. Her eyes widened. "You're leaving?" "I'll stay at a hotel tonight," he said, not looking at her. "For how long?" Silence. "How long, Miho?" she demanded. "I don't know." Her breath hitched. "Is there someone else?" He paused with his hand on the zipper. "Yes." The word hung in the air like frost. Hannah took a step back, her knees weak. "Her name is Eugene," he added. "She understands the life I have. She doesn't hold me back." The walls spun. The floor might as well have collapsed. She felt as if every moment, every smile, every promise had just been stripped bare. "You're throwing us away for convenience," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm not throwing the kids away," he said quickly. "I'll provide for them." "They don't need your money, Miho," she cried. "They need their father. They need love. They need to feel safe." But his eyes were already elsewhere. He picked up his bag and walked to the door. "Miho," she called after him, her voice shaking. "Do they even matter to you anymore?" He hesitated at the threshold. Then, coldly, "You'll understand eventually. This is for the best." The door clicked shut, and just like that, the man she married vanished into the night, without a backward glance. She sank to the floor, hugging her arms around her knees, her sobs quiet and raw, echoing in the silence of their broken home. For hours, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Only when Jiho's voice called sleepily from the hallway did she wipe her face and stand up. "Amma, did Appa leave again?" she nodded slowly. "Just for a little while, baby." He rubbed his eyes. "Will he be back tomorrow?" She couldn't answer. Instead, she knelt and pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly as the snow fell harder outside, blanketing the world in white. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of the storm. And though her heart had been shattered, something deep inside her was beginning to stir. A quiet ember, a mother's strength, a woman's awakening, the last warmth left in a world gone cold. At first, Hannah held on to hope. She told the kids he was just working hard, that he needed time, that grown-up things were sometimes hard to explain. But by the third week, when his gifts didn't arrive for Jiho's birthday, when no calls came even on weekends, she knew he had erased them. She tried calling his office. Once, the receptionist, cold and clipped, informed her Mr. Seo was in a long-term overseas consultation. He wasn't. She knew where he was. She just hadn't wanted to admit it. But then, one afternoon, while walking Minjun back from the neighborhood daycare, Hannah saw it. There, across the glass wall of a downtown restaurant, sitting by the window with a smile she hadn't seen in months, was Miho, and with him a woman, young, beautiful, impeccably dressed in a pale lavender coat and matching heels. Her hand rested lightly on Miho's wrist as they laughed, sipping wine. Her smile was poised, confident, territorial. "Eugene." Hannah froze. Minjun tugged her hand. "Amma, look, that's Appa." Her breath caught. Don't point, baby, she whispered. But it was too late. Miho's eyes had found them. And in that moment, split second and eternal, Hannah saw it. He didn't flinch. He didn't stand. He didn't move toward his son who hadn't seen him in weeks. He simply looked startled, then lowered his eyes and turned back to Eugene, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve like nothing had happened. Minjun pressed his face against the glass, fogging it with his breath. Why is Appa with another lady? Hannah knelt down and gently pulled him back. Come on, she said, her voice trembling. It's cold. She led him away, each step heavier than the last, her lungs burning. That night she couldn't sleep. Her hands shook as she folded the children's clothes. Her chest felt like it was splitting open, trying to understand how someone could just switch off, unlove. She had stood by him when he had nothing, when his suits were borrowed and his ties wrinkled and his hands were tired from juggling deliveries just to pay rent. And now, when his name was on headlines, when luxury followed him like a shadow, he had chosen to discard the woman who knew the sound of his heartbeat in the dark. Discarded, as if she were nothing more than a chapter to be edited out. The next morning a letter arrived, not from Miho but from a law firm, a formal notice. Notice of spousal separation, notice of asset division, notice of relocation. Miho had officially transferred the lease to another name, Eugene's. The apartment was no longer hers. She and the children had 30 days to vacate. 30 days. Hannah stared at the paper, her vision blurring. When Jiho walked in and asked if they could decorate for Christmas, she nodded with a smile, then excused herself to the bathroom and collapsed to the floor, gasping for air she couldn't find. Later that week, unable to hold it anymore, she called him. The phone rang twice before he answered. Miho, she whispered, please, don't do this. Sigh. Hannah, you shouldn't call me during work hours. Work hours, her voice cracked. You've erased us, and you're talking about work hours. I'm not doing this to hurt you. But you are, Miho. You are. You're tearing our children from their home, from everything they know. They'll adjust. They're not business assets. They're your children. Silence. Then Eugene wants to move in. And it's my name on the lease. There it was. The final cut. You're choosing her over your children, Hannah whispered. I'm choosing my future. One that makes sense. Hannah's breath came shallow. Was I never part of that future? You were, until it stopped working. Until I stopped being convenient. He didn't deny it. Miho, she said, voice shaking. One day you'll look for them, and they'll look at you the same way you looked at us today. Like strangers. I hope that day never comes, he said flatly. Goodbye, Hannah. Click. She stared at the silent phone in her hand, her reflection warped in the black screen. Gone. The boy who once knelt on a hilltop with a silver ring was gone, replaced by a man of numbers, contracts, and cold decisions. The days that followed blurred together. She stopped eating. She stopped checking the calendar. She only moved because the children needed her to. But when she caught Jiho crying alone in the bedroom one night, holding a crumpled photo of Miho, something shifted. She sat down beside him and pulled him close. He left us, Amma, Jiho sobbed. What did we do wrong? Her heart shattered all over again. She held his face in her hands. You did nothing wrong, she whispered fiercely. You hear me? Nothing. Then why doesn't he love us anymore? Tears streamed down her face as she pulled him into her arms. Because some people forget what love really means, she said. But I will never forget, and I will never leave you. That night, while the children slept, Hannah opened a blank notebook. She began to write, not for Miho, for them, for her children, for herself. Stories, letters, memories, promises, a quiet rebellion against erasure. The snow fell heavier that night, blanketing the city in white. And in that small apartment, soon to no longer be hers, a woman who had been broken began, piece by painful piece, to rise again. She sat on the edge of the couch, a stack of folded clothes beside her and a letter in her trembling hands. An eviction confirmation. The deadline had arrived. They had to be out by morning. The children were asleep, bundled together on the floor beside the small heater. Hannah had made up a little camping area for them, pretending it was a special Christmas adventure. But her heart was in pieces. The doorbell rang. She jumped, startled. Her eyes darted to the clock. 10:47 p.m. Who would come this late? She opened the door slowly. There he was, Miho, wearing a sleek charcoal coat, his hair styled, his shoes spotless despite the snow outside. He looked untouched by the chaos he'd left behind. A man untouched by regret. And behind him, standing slightly back and clutching a designer purse like a trophy, Eugene. Hannah didn't speak. Miho stepped forward. I came to talk. She blocked the doorway. There's nothing left to talk about, she said quietly. Hannah, Eugene interjected, her voice polished and slightly amused. Miho wanted to do this properly. It's Christmas Eve after all. We didn't want things to get messy. Hannah's jaw clenched. Messy, Eugene smiled. We gave you time. But Miho thought it would be more respectful to give the notice in person. Hannah laughed. Bitter, broken, respectful. That's what this is to you. Miho looked past her, toward the inside of the apartment. Are the kids awake? She stepped in his line of sight. They're asleep. You don't get to see them. Not like this. His voice hardened. Don't be dramatic. I'm still their father. No, she said, voice sharp. You were their father. Fathers don't vanish. Fathers don't serve eviction papers and call it respect. Eugene shifted her weight. This isn't healthy. The apartment belongs to us now. It's best for everyone to move forward. Miho has a life to build, and you have one to rebuild. Hannah finished, eyes burning. And I'll do it. Without pity. Without your money. Without your visits. Miho's lips tightened. I transferred enough funds to your account to get a motel. Use it. Hannah stared at him, silent for a moment. Then she said, almost too softly, you could have left with your pride. But instead, you had to come back, on Christmas Eve, and watch us fall. He didn't respond. She stepped back and closed the door without another word. Inside, she pressed her back against the door, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor. Her hands covered her face as the weight of everything she had held in for weeks came crashing down. She cried. Not because she'd lost a home. Not even because she'd lost him. She cried because she had done everything right, and it still wasn't enough. She cried because her children would wake up to nothing tomorrow. No lights, no gifts, no magic. Just a mother too broken to lie anymore. After what felt like hours, she stood. She packed. The children stirred around 2 a.m., rubbing their eyes, blinking at her in confusion. Amma, what are you doing? Jiho asked. We're going on a little trip, she whispered. An adventure, just for a while. Ariam yawned. Is Appa coming? No, sweetheart, she said gently. It's just us. Minjun clung to her leg, half asleep. It's cold. I know, she murmured. But I'll keep you warm. They left the apartment carrying 2 suitcases and 1 backpack. The rest they had to leave behind. Toys, furniture, clothes that wouldn't fit. Their world reduced to a few bags and a mother's fragile strength. The snow fell heavily as they walked. Hannah tried every shelter she could remember, but it was Christmas Eve. Everything was full. People were wrapped in their own struggles. No one had space. Not for 4. By dawn, she found a quiet train station that stayed open for the early commuters. It wasn't warm, but it was dry. The benches were cold steel, but they were better than the street. She pulled all 3 children into her arms, covering them with her coat. Her fingers were numb, her lips dry and cracked. Still, she sang. She hummed lullabies to keep their eyes closed, to keep them dreaming, to make them believe, if only for a few more hours, that it was just another adventure. As she sang, tears slipped silently down her cheeks. Christmas morning came. People bustled past them, busy with gifts and coffee and catching trains to homes full of warmth. None of them noticed the woman huddled on the bench with 3 sleeping children. But Hannah didn't look at them. She closed her eyes, pressing her lips to the forehead of each child, her voice hoarse now. I won't let this break us, she whispered. I won't. Somewhere deep inside her, past the pain, past the shame, past the exhaustion, something began to glow. Promise. Not to him, not to the world, to them, to herself. The first light of dawn crept across the train station floor, catching the glint of a mother's tears and the soft rise and fall of 3 small chests, curled against her sides. Hannah sat motionless, afraid that if she shifted even slightly, the warmth between them would slip away. Her coat was barely enough for one person, let alone 4. But she had wrapped it around them like armor. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Eugen's voice. We didn't want things to get messy. Messy. That's what she and her children were now. An inconvenience to be cleared away. The lights above flickered. A maintenance worker passed them, pausing briefly to glance at the huddled figures. He didn't stop. He didn't speak. He just kept walking. Minjun stirred first. "Amma," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "Is it morning?" Hannah pressed a kiss to his forehead. Her lips were dry and cracked. "Yes, baby. It's morning." Jiho stretched and looked around, blinking slowly. "Are we still on our adventure?" She forced a smile, but her voice came out as a whisper. "We are." Ariam tugged at her sleeve. "Can we go home now?" Hannah swallowed hard. She looked away, then back at them. "We're going to find a new home. Okay, a better one. One where we're all safe." Ariam frowned. "I liked our old home." Hannah's chest tightened. "I know," she said softly. "I did too." Her stomach growled. She knew the children must be starving too. Their last meal had been the night before. Plain rice and broth she'd managed to stretch into something warm. But now there was nothing. She stood slowly, legs stiff from sitting on the cold bench all night. "Come on, everyone," she said, adjusting the backpack over her shoulder. "Let's find something to eat." They wandered the nearby streets, Hannah holding Minjun's hand, the twins walking quietly beside her. The world around them was already alive. Cars rushing by, families with wrapped gifts and clean clothes moving in and out of cafes and bakeries. She scanned every window, searching for something, anything, she could afford. But her wallet was nearly empty. A few coins, a transit card. Her phone battery had died hours ago. They stopped in front of a small convenience store. Jiho looked up at her. "Can we just get some bread?" he asked. She looked through the window at the warm pastries on display. One roll was more than she had left. Her pride screamed at her to walk away. But her children were hungry. So, with trembling hands, she led them inside. The warmth hit her like a wave. The scent of steamed buns, hot coffee, and fresh soup almost made her knees buckle. She picked up a single bread roll from the basket near the front. "One." She brought it to the counter. The clerk glanced at the children, then at her worn coat, her sunken eyes. "That'll be 2,801, he said monotone. Hannah emptied her coins on the counter. There was a long pause. "You're short." She stared at him, lips parting. "Please," she said, voice low. "It's for them." The man frowned. "This isn't a charity. If you don't have enough, I'll pay later," she said quickly. They haven't eaten since yesterday." A beat of silence. Then a voice spoke from behind her. Calm, curious, slightly amused. "Add 5 steamed buns, a pack of milk, and 2 ramen bowls. I'll pay." Hannah froze. She turned. A man in his late 30s stood behind her, wearing a hospital ID badge and a clean, pressed coat. He looked at her with a mixture of surprise and familiarity, as if he knew her from somewhere and couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "Hannah!" Her breath caught in her throat. It had been years, but she remembered him instantly. Dr. Jisoo Kong. They had studied together at university. He had always been kind, warm, a quiet presence in the back of every classroom. They'd lost touch after graduation. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He stepped forward, eyes scanning her face, her clothes, the children clinging to her legs. "I thought." He stopped himself. What happened? Shame hit her like a tidal wave. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear, but she couldn't lie. My husband left, she said, voice barely above a whisper. He took everything, even our home. Jisu's expression darkened. He looked down at the children. And you've been on the street, she nodded. He paid the clerk quickly, handed the bag to her, then knelt down and spoke gently to the children. Hi, I'm Jisu. Are you guys hungry? They nodded silently. Let's find a warm place to sit. Okay. Hannah tried to protest, but he shook his head. No, don't say anything. Not right now. Just come with me. He led them to a small cafe next door. He seemed to know the owner, who let them sit in the corner by the heater. The children devoured the food in grateful silence. Hannah could barely eat, her stomach twisting with embarrassment. Jisu watched her quietly. You should have called me, he said. I didn't think you'd remember me, she replied, staring down at her untouched bun. I never forgot you. She looked up, startled. I remember how you stayed late tutoring that kid who never thanked you. How you gave up your spot on the debate trip so someone else could go. You were always, he exhaled, brighter than all of us. She shook her head, blinking back tears. Not anymore. He leaned forward. Listen to me. You're still that woman. And you don't have to do this alone. I can't be a burden. You're not. I have nothing, Jisu. Nothing. He looked at her, unwavering. Then start here. With me. She stared at him, heart thudding. I can help you find a shelter, a school for the kids, a job, whatever you need. But don't push me away, Hannah. Tears spilled down her cheeks. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen, really seen, not as a problem to be moved, not as a failure to be pitied, but as someone worth helping. She nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. Okay. And as her children slept later that day in a quiet corner of Jisu's clinic, Hannah sat in the hallway alone, breathing for the first time in what felt like forever. She wasn't safe yet. She wasn't whole. But maybe, just maybe, Jisu had found the place that same evening. He spoke gently with the woman at the front desk, a sturdy, middle-aged volunteer named Yunja, who offered Hannah a quiet room near the back, away from the noise of the city. It's not much, Yunja said kindly, but it's warm, safe. Hannah bowed, her voice trembling. Thank you. I didn't know where else we could go. You're not alone anymore, dear. The room was small, just a set of bunk beds and a metal heater in the corner. But to Hannah, it felt like a castle. She laid the children down one by one, tucking them under the rough but clean blankets, brushing the hair from their foreheads. They were asleep within minutes. Hannah stayed awake. She sat on the edge of the lower bunk, hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic cup of tea that Yunja had pressed into her palms. She stared at the wall, not really seeing it. Her body was here, but her mind was still in the cold. In the train station, on the sidewalk, in the restaurant window, watching her husband pretend her children didn't exist. She felt the sting behind her eyes again, but this time, she let it go. The tears came slowly, quietly, not like a storm but like a surrender. The sound of soft footsteps made her look up. Jisu stood in the doorway holding 2 paper cups of instant coffee. I figured you wouldn't sleep, he said gently. She gave a weak laugh. Is it that obvious? He stepped in and handed her the cup, sat beside her, just close enough to feel safe. Not invasive. Was it hard for you? She asked after a long silence. What? Becoming who you are. The job. The life. The peace. Jisu exhaled through his nose, smiling faintly. Harder than I expected. Not because of work, but because, somewhere along the way, I realized success doesn't mean what I thought it would. She turned to him. What does it mean now? Having something worth coming home to. They were quiet again. Then Hannah asked the question she'd kept buried for weeks. Do you think I made a mistake staying with him for so long? He looked at her, serious now. No, he said. You believed in someone. You gave them love, trust, time. That's not weakness. That's courage. But I stayed even when he stopped loving me. Jisu's gaze softened. That's not your failure. That's his. Her lip trembled. I feel like I don't even exist anymore, she whispered. Like the person I used to be died the moment he turned away. He leaned forward, his voice low and certain. You're still here, Hannah. Even if you feel invisible. Even if the world made you believe you don't matter. You're here. And I see you. Her eyes filled again. But this time it didn't hurt as much. The next morning came slowly. Pale winter light crept in through the window. Hannah woke to the sound of Ariam singing softly under her breath, building a tower out of folded socks. Jiho sat at the tiny desk, drawing something on a piece of notebook paper. Minjun snored lightly, still cocooned in his blanket. Hannah got up, her body aching but her spirit slightly less heavy. Downstairs in the common kitchen, she found a notice on the board. Weekly cleaning rotation. Help needed in the kitchen. She stood there for a long time, staring at it. Then, slowly, she took the marker tied to the wall and wrote her name under the list. She helped cook that morning. She chopped onions, peeled potatoes, stirred broth. Her hands remembered the rhythm. Her body remembered the movement. But her heart, it was still catching up. As she scrubbed a pan by the sink, Yoonja came up beside her. You cook like someone who used to do it for love, she said kindly. Hannah nodded. I did. You still do. That afternoon, the shelter's coordinator approached her about an opening in a nearby daycare that was looking for temporary help. Someone patient. Someone who knew how to comfort children, tell stories, organize playtime. You don't have to say yes right away, the woman told her. But I think you'd be perfect. That night, after the children fell asleep, Hannah sat alone at the small table in the corner of the room, staring at the flyer. She thought about her old life, the warm dinners, the laughter she used to share with Miho, back when ambition hadn't frozen his heart. But mostly she thought about her children, their tired eyes, their unspoken questions, their unwavering trust in her. She took out her notebook and wrote a single sentence. Maybe this is where we begin again. She would take the job. She would start small. She would rebuild not for revenge, but for survival, for dignity, for them. And maybe one day they would look back at this season of their lives, not as the winter they were abandoned, but as the winter they survived. The kids were already asleep upstairs, their faces calm, their tiny bodies tangled in each other's warmth. She stood in the doorway and watched them for a moment longer than usual. There was something sacred in their sleep, something that reminded her she hadn't failed. Not completely. She stepped back into the hallway, her thoughts whirling in the quiet. Her hands itched to write again. She reached for the notebook hidden under her cot. The pages were wrinkled and smudged, filled with pieces of herself she had slowly stitched back together through ink. That night, with the shelter humming in the background and the world still outside, she began a new letter. Not to Miho, not even to herself. This one was for her children. To my precious Jiho, Ariam, and Minjun. If one day you ever wonder why we had nothing that Christmas, it wasn't because you weren't good enough. It wasn't because you weren't loved. It was because sometimes even the strongest walls break. But I promise you, I was building something stronger with every tear you never saw me cry. And with every step you took beside me, you gave me reason to try again. You saved me. Her pen stopped. The door creaked softly. She looked up. It was Jiho. He rubbed his eyes and walked toward her slowly. I couldn't sleep, he mumbled. I had a bad dream. She opened her arms without a word, and he climbed into her lap, his head resting on her shoulder. He looked down at the notebook. Are you writing another story? She hesitated, then smiled faintly. I guess I am. Can I read it someday? She kissed the top of his head. One day, yes, when you're ready. He was quiet for a moment, then whispered, Amma, do you think Appa misses us? Her heart twisted. I don't know, she said honestly, but I know we remember him, and I know that you are unforgettable. He didn't respond, but his small fingers curled tightly into her sleeve. A few days later, she sat on a bench outside the daycare during her lunch break. The winter air was crisp but not cruel anymore. She held a thermos of hot tea in her hands, her fingers warming slowly. That's when one of the teachers ran outside, breathless. "Hannah, you need to come in." She jumped to her feet. "Are the children okay?" "It's not them," the woman said, leading her back inside. "It's the news." Confused, Hannah entered the staff room where a small television sat in the corner. Several teachers were gathered around, whispering, and then she saw it. Her own face. A grainy video was playing, footage from a phone. Her huddled on a bench at the train station on Christmas morning, arms wrapped tightly around her children, snow falling around them, silent, still, a heartbreaking image of love and survival. The reporter's voice cut in a video uploaded anonymously last week has gone viral, showing a mother and her children surviving the bitter winter with nothing but each other. "We've learned her name is Seo Hannah, and her story is now being called the Christmas Angel Without a Home." Hannah stared at the screen, stunned. Her knees gave out and she sank onto the nearest chair. The camera zoomed in on her tear-streaked face, her cracked lips pressed to Minjun's forehead, snow gathering in her hair. "I didn't even know someone was recording," she whispered. The teachers looked at her, their eyes filled with something that hadn't been directed at her in a long time: compassion, respect. "She's right here," one of them said softly. "She's you." The door behind her opened. Jisoo entered. His face was pale. "You saw it?" she asked him. He nodded. "I think the whole country has." She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to be a symbol," he finished gently. "You didn't choose it, Hannah, but people needed to see it." She shook her head. "What if Miho sees it?" Jisoo crouched beside her. "Let him." Her eyes filled. "He'll twist it. Use it to say I failed. That I dragged the kids down." "No," Jisoo said firmly now. "Anyone who watches this can see the truth. You didn't drag them down. You carried them." Her hands trembled. "Why does this hurt more than anything else?" "Because now the world sees the pain you've been hiding." That night, the shelter phone rang off the hook. Journalists, organizations wanting to donate clothes, food, school supplies. A woman from a publishing house asked if Hannah would consider sharing her story in a book. A local pastor stopped by with a bag of toys and whispered, "I saw the video." I cried. "You reminded me of my own mother." Hannah didn't know what to say. The attention felt like a storm. But it wasn't a storm of pity. It was something else. It was recognition. That night, she opened her notebook again. Sometimes the world doesn't notice your pain until it spills into public view. But even then, the love you carry in the dark is no less real. And when light finally finds you, you realize you were never invisible. You were just surviving, in silence. She had spent the last few days navigating a storm of attention. Interviews requested, offers extended, donations arriving daily for her children, coats, boots, books, toys. People from all over the city, strangers who had seen that grainy video, were suddenly speaking her name with reverence. But none of it erased what they had lived through. None of it could rewrite the night her children fell asleep cold, or the day Miho closed the door on their lives. Fame, she was learning, had a cruel undertone. Some of the messages were cruel. Why didn't her husband help? Where's the father? She must have done something. The comments burned deeper than she expected. Assumptions, judgments, and strangers dissecting her pain like entertainment. She wanted to disappear again, but she couldn't. She didn't have that luxury. That's when the knock came at the shelter's front door. Yoonja opened it, her voice cautious. "Hannah, there's someone here asking for you." Hannah turned, heart instantly tightening. It wasn't Miho, but it might as well have been a ghost from the past. Standing there, awkwardly holding a small gift bag, was Do-hee, Miho's younger sister. The last time they'd spoken was almost 2 years ago, at a birthday dinner for Jiho, back when the family still pretended everything was fine. Do-hee stepped forward slowly. "Hannah, I saw the video," she said, voice low. I didn't know. I had no idea." Hannah didn't move. "Didn't know what, that your brother abandoned us, that he evicted his children on Christmas Eve?" Do-hee's eyes filled. He never told us the truth. He said you left him. Hannah stared at her, stunned. What? He said you gave up. That you walked out with the kids because you couldn't handle his work hours. That he begged you to stay, but you were too proud. Hannah laughed then, bitter, hollow. Of course he did, she said. He built an empire on lies. Why stop there? Dohee reached out. I came to apologize. Not just for him. For me. I didn't reach out. I didn't ask questions. I just believed what was easier to believe. Hannah pulled her arms tighter around herself. You didn't even call when the kids stopped showing up to family dinners. Dohee looked down. I thought you wanted space. I wanted help, Hannah whispered, but I was too ashamed to say it. There was silence. Then Hannah asked, without looking up, why are you really here? Dohee stepped closer. Because I saw the look in Jiho's eyes in that video. That's my nephew. That's my blood. And I can't live with myself if I pretend he doesn't exist. Hannah finally met her gaze. They're not charity cases. I know. And I don't need pity. You don't have it, Dohee said gently. You have my respect. For a moment, Hannah said nothing. Then, quietly, she asked, Did Miho send you? Dohee shook her head. No. He doesn't even know I'm here. Honestly, he's too busy trying to spin a PR nightmare now that the public has realized who you are. Hannah's stomach turned. He knows, of course. The media figured it out. He was spotted last night leaving a restaurant with Eugene, and someone asked about the video. He said it was complicated. Hannah scoffed. Of course he did. He's scared, Dohee said. Not because of what he's done, but because people are finally watching. Hannah lowered herself slowly onto the couch, hands trembling just slightly. I don't want revenge, she said. I don't want to destroy him. Dohee sat beside her. Then what do you want? She looked over at the children's jackets hanging on the hooks. I want my children to know the truth. And I want to build something without his shadow looming over us. Dohee nodded slowly. Then let me help. Not as Miho's sister. As someone who should have been there. Someone who should have seen you sooner. Hannah studied her. You have to mean it, she said. Because if you walk away again, they'll notice. And it will hurt more than you know. I won't, Dohee whispered. I promise. A few minutes later, Hannah led her to the children's room. Jiho looked up first, startled. Is that Auntie Dohee? Dohee knelt down, her eyes full. Hi, Jiho, she said softly. I've missed you so much. He blinked. Appa said you were busy. She swallowed. I was. But not anymore. Ariam ran into Hannah's arms, whispering, Why is she here? Hannah whispered back. She came to visit. And maybe to stay a little longer this time. Dohee brought out a small tin from the bag she carried. Cookies. Their favorite kind. The ones she used to bake with them on weekends. Minjun clapped his hands. Is it Christmas again? Everyone laughed. Quietly, but genuinely. Later, after the kids had gone to bed, Hannah sat alone in the hallway again. The notebook rested in her lap, and her pen hovered over the paper. Sometimes the apology doesn't come from the person who broke you. Sometimes it comes from someone who stood too far back. And when it does, it doesn't erase the pain, but it makes space for healing. Maybe, just maybe, we're not as alone as we thought. Wasn't glamorous. Wiping sticky hands, calming tantrums, mopping up spilled juice, but it was honest. It gave her something to build with. Night, she wrote. Quiet letters to the future, pieces of her memory sealed in soft words. Sometimes Dohee joined her. Sometimes Jisoo did too. But always, it was her children that anchored her. Until everything shifted. Again. It started with whispers on social media, in news clips, in hushed coffee shop conversations. The tycoon's lies unraveling. Who is the woman behind his fall from grace? Mysterious Mistress Titan's grip on corporate empire. She tried to ignore it. She tried to protect the children from hearing anything. But then, late one evening, while helping Jiho with his homework in the shelter's common room, her son looked up with eyes too wise for his age and said, Amma, someone at school said Appa's company is in trouble, that he lied about us. Is that true? She froze. Jiho's hands tightened around his pencil. Is that why he never came back? Her voice caught in her throat. Sweetheart, what your father did, it had nothing to do with you, or Aryam, or Minjun. It wasn't because you weren't good enough. Then why did he say we didn't exist? She stared at him. He looked down, whispering, that's what the boy said. His mom showed him something online. She reached across the table and cupped his face. You exist, Jiho. You shine. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to. The next day, Jisoo found her at the daycare, holding her phone tightly in both hands, her knuckles white. I need to show you something, he said, his voice low and tight. They sat together in the small break room. He pulled out his tablet and played a clip. It was from a press conference Miho had held earlier that morning. Eugene stood beside him, poised, her hand resting on his arm. His voice, calm and calculated, echoed from the screen. The rumors about my family have been exaggerated. My former wife and I separated long ago. It was mutual, amicable. Any depictions of abandonment are personal interpretations and do not reflect the full reality. Hannah's chest clenched. As for the children, there was a legal misunderstanding. We've taken steps to resolve it privately. I respect their privacy and ask the public to do the same. The video ended. She sat in silence for a moment. Then she looked up at Jisoo, her face pale, jaw clenched. He's rewriting everything. Jisoo nodded grimly. He's trying to protect his image. Blame is easier to shift than truth. Her voice shook. He's making it sound like I'm unstable, like I turned my pain into a publicity stunt. He's scared, Jisoo said. You're not invisible anymore, and that terrifies him. I can't let him do this, she whispered. I won't let him erase what he did. I won't let my children grow up thinking they were the mistake. Later that evening, Do-hee arrived at the shelter with a folder clutched in her hands. Her face was pale, lips pressed into a tight line. I need to show you something, she said, echoing Jisoo's words. Hannah followed her into the quiet back room. Do-hee placed the folder on the table and opened it. Internal emails, statements, notes, from Eugene, from Miho, proof that they covered everything up, threatened employees, paid off reporters. I got them from someone who couldn't stay silent anymore. Hannah stared at the papers, hands trembling. Her eyes scanned words that burned. She's unstable. Use the kids as leverage. If this story gets out, make her look emotional and irrational. Secure the apartment transfer before anyone notices. A cold rage settled into her bones. Do-hee reached across the table, her voice shaking. You can use this, Hannah. You can show the truth. But Hannah said nothing. She just stared at the proof. Proof that her nightmare hadn't been imagined, exaggerated, or deserved. It had been planned. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat in the window, notebook in her lap, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Jisoo knocked softly at the door. Can I come in? She nodded. He sat beside her, eyes gentle. You look like someone on the edge of something. She gave a breathless laugh. I feel like it. Do I speak out, risk more, or do I stay silent and protect what little peace we've built? Jisoo looked at her carefully. I can't answer that for you, but I can tell you this. The woman I've seen these past few weeks, she's not afraid anymore. Hannah looked at him. A part of me still is. And that's okay. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite it. She turned her head to the window again. If I speak out, it's not for revenge. I want the world to see who Miho really is. But more than that, I want my children to know their mother never let silence win. Jisoo reached for her hand. You're not alone. She nodded slowly. And that night, in her notebook, beneath the last unfinished letter, she wrote she just received a call from the shelter. Minjun had collapsed. Her heart hadn't stopped racing since. Jisoo met her at the hospital entrance. His coat was unbuttoned, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't speak. He just took her hand and led her inside. I brought him straight here, he said as they walked briskly down the corridor. He had a fever this morning, But by the time I got back from the clinic, he was burning up. Where is he? Hannah's voice cracked. Pediatrics. Room 304. She didn't wait for the elevator. She ran the stairs 2 at a time, barely feeling her legs. When she burst through the door, her breath caught. Minjun lay in a small hospital bed. For in his hand, his face flushed and damp with sweat. Monitors beeped steadily at his side. Ariam sat beside him, holding his favorite toy bunny, her expression frozen in fear. Hannah rushed to the bedside and knelt down. "Sweetheart, I'm here." Minjun stirred, his lips barely moving. "Amma, it hurts." Her heart shattered. She brushed the damp hair from his forehead, tears falling freely now. "I know, baby. I know. You're going to be okay. I promise." Jiho stood silently by the window, arms wrapped tightly around his own chest. "He was shaking," he said. "I tried to wake him up, but he wouldn't open his eyes." Hannah reached for him with her free hand, pulling him close. "You did the right thing, Jiho. You saved your brother." The door opened and a young doctor entered, clipboard in hand. His expression was calm, but firm. "He has severe pneumonia," he said. "We're starting antibiotics and fluids. We caught it in time, but it'll be a few difficult days. He needs rest, warmth, and careful observation." Hannah nodded, unable to speak. Her voice had vanished beneath the weight in her chest. Jisoo stepped closer. "Is he stable for now?" "Yes. But his immune system is weak. The stress, the exposure to cold, it all added up." After the doctor left, Jisoo placed a gentle hand on Hannah's shoulder. "He's strong. He gets that from you." She shook her head. "He should never have had to be strong. He's 5. Her voice broke. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have known he wasn't feeling well. I was so caught up in everything." "You were surviving," Jisoo said quietly. "You've been keeping everyone together with your bare hands." Hannah leaned over, pressing a kiss to Minjun's warm cheek. "I can't lose him," she whispered. "Not after everything. I can't." "You won't," Jisoo said. "He's going to get better." They stayed by his side through the night. Jiho and Ariam eventually fell asleep curled together on the couch in the corner. Hannah didn't sleep at all. She sat beside the bed, fingers wrapped around Minjun's, humming softly through her tears. By dawn, the fever had lowered slightly. Minjun slept peacefully, his breathing steadier. Hannah leaned back, her body trembling with relief and exhaustion. That morning, a nurse entered with a breakfast tray. She placed it gently on the table and handed Hannah a folded note. "It was dropped off for you." Hannah opened it with trembling hands. "Hannah, I saw the video. I saw the press. I see now what I refused to see before. I failed you. I failed them. I want to make it right. Please meet me. Just once. Tomorrow. 4 p.m. at the Han River Park." Miho, she stared at the words for a long time. It wasn't apology. It wasn't even accountability. It was an invitation, and it made her sick. She looked over at Minjun, then back at the letter. Jisoo walked in and noticed the paper in her hand. "Is that from him?" She nodded slowly. He frowned. "What does he want?" "Redemption," she said flatly. "Or a photo op?" "Hard to tell anymore." "Are you going?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on her son, his little chest rising and falling beneath the hospital blanket. Then finally she spoke. "If I go, it's not for him. It's for me." Jisoo studied her carefully. "Then I'll be there. Not beside you, just close. In case you need to walk away." Hannah nodded. But that night, as she sat by Minjun's bed with her notebook open, her thoughts felt scattered. What could she possibly say to the man who had watched her suffer in silence, to the man who had looked her in the eyes and lied? Over and over she began to write. Not a letter this time, but a truth, just for herself. "The man who hurt me doesn't get to define me. He doesn't get to rewrite the story. I walked through fire while he watched, and I carried 3 hearts through it with me. I won't meet him to forgive. I'll meet him to end it." And outside, the city continued to move, unaware of the quiet reckoning that was only hours away, unaware that a mother, once discarded, was now rising to face the man who broke her. The sky above was overcast, thick with gray clouds that hung low and heavy, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Families passed nearby, parents chasing after laughing children, couples sharing hot drinks, tourists taking photos of the Han River glinting beneath the pale winter sun. But Hannah felt none of it. Her eyes were fixed ahead, her breath slow and controlled. She had dressed simply, no makeup, no accessories. Just the woman she had become, worn, weathered, but unbroken. She spotted him before he saw her. Miho stood near the water's edge, wearing a wool coat that probably cost more than she'd made in the last 6 months. His hair was neatly styled, his expression unreadable. Next to him, Eugene wasn't there, thank God. But 2 men lingered at a polite distance. PR people, maybe. Damage control. He turned. His face shifted when he saw her. For a second, his eyes softened, like the boy she once knew. But then, as if remembering who he had become, the mask returned. He took a step forward. Hannah! She stopped 3 feet away. Why am I here, Miho? He looked uncomfortable. Not guilty, uncomfortable. I wanted to talk. Without cameras. Without headlines. Just us. She let out a soft, bitter laugh. You don't get to say us anymore. He looked down briefly. You're right. There was a long pause. Only the wind moved between them. He tried again. I saw the hospital record. Minjun. Is he okay? He almost died, she said plainly. But you already knew that. Or you would've if you'd ever called. He flinched. I didn't know he was that sick. You didn't ask. He looked down at the ground, then back at her. You weren't supposed to suffer like that. I thought the money I left would be enough. Enough, her voice cracked. Do you really believe that money replaces protection, that it hugs children when they cry or feeds them when they're shivering? He was silent. Hannah stepped closer. Do you want to know what enough looks like? Miho, it looks like waking up in a freezing train station on Christmas morning with your children clinging to your body like you're the only thing between them and death. He opened his mouth, but she raised her hand. I carried them every single day through a storm you created and refused to look at. And then you lied, publicly, to everyone, to them. I was trying to fix things. No, she snapped, her voice trembling. You were trying to fix your image. Miho's jaw clenched. You don't understand what was at stake. I understand perfectly, she said. Your company, your reputation, your comfort. That's always been your priority. She took a step back, drawing a shaky breath. You rewrote the story, but I lived it. And now everyone else sees it too. I didn't come here to argue, he said, voice low. She studied him. No, you came here hoping I'd forgive you. Hoping I'd give you a soundbite you could spin. I wanted to apologize. Then do it, she said. To them, not to me. You abandoned your children, Miho. Not just physically. You erased them. You erased their pain. He finally broke eye contact. They're still young, he said quietly. Maybe one day, they'll understand. They already do, Hannah whispered. They understand everything. Jiho doesn't speak your name anymore. Ariam flinches every time she sees a black car. And Minjun. Minjun cries in his sleep. Miho's eyes welled up. I made mistakes. No, she said. You made choices. The wind picked up again, brushing her hair across her cheek. He swallowed hard. Can I see them? She paused. No, his face paled. Hannah, you lost that right, not because I said so, but because you left. You made your absence louder than any presence could ever be. And now, I protect them from you. Miho looked like he'd been slapped, but she didn't flinch. I'm not bitter, she added. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I needed to look you in the eye and tell you. Your chapter in our lives is over. I thought you said you didn't come for vengeance, he said bitterly. I didn't, she said. But the truth always feels like punishment to a guilty man. She turned to leave, but he called out after her. Hannah! She stopped, back still turned. Was there ever a moment, after I left, When you missed me, she closed her eyes, then answered, I missed the man I thought you were, but you were already gone long before you walked out that door. And without another word, she walked away. Jisoo was waiting at the edge of the park, leaning against a lamppost. When he saw her coming, he stood straighter, eyes full of quiet concern. You okay? He asked. She nodded. Then her lip quivered and her voice dropped into a whisper. No one's ever looked so small to me. He didn't say anything, just opened his arms, and she fell into them, letting herself be held, not like someone broken, but like someone finally free. Later that night, with her notebook open and Minjun's hand in hers, she wrote 2 days after Hannah walked away from the Han River. A video surfaced. Not hers. Not the train station footage. Something new. Something damning. It was Eugene, caught on a security camera in a boardroom, speaking without filters, without cameras she knew were rolling. Of course we pushed her out. She was a threat. People sympathize with mothers. But once she's painted unstable, emotional, angry, it's easier to erase her. The clip was only 32 seconds. It was enough. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Shares, retweets, headlines, outrage. Hannah sat in the small staff lounge at the daycare, eyes glued to her phone. The video kept looping. Eugene's cold smirk, the clarity of the words. There was no denying the intent. Jisoo burst in a moment later, his expression unreadable. You saw it? He asked. She nodded, setting her phone down slowly. She did it to herself, she said quietly. I don't even need to speak. But now they want you to, he said. They're asking for your voice. I'm tired of cameras, she whispered. I'm tired of being a symbol. I just wanted to be a mother. He sat beside her. Then speak as one, not as the woman he left, not as the woman they tried to break, just as you. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in pale gold, Hannah sat in front of a borrowed laptop in the shelter's quietest room. Though he helped her set it up, Jisoo watched from the hallway just outside the frame. She hit record, and then she simply spoke. No makeup, no script, just her. Her voice was steady, low, honest. My name is Hannah. I am a mother of 3. Last Christmas, my children and I lost everything. We were evicted with a letter. No warning, no mercy. We slept in a train station, clinging to each other for warmth. My husband said it was mutual. He said I left, but I didn't. I stayed through every late night, every silence, every dismissal. I stayed until I realized the man I loved wasn't coming back. And when I left that house, I didn't just carry 3 children. I carried all the shame they wanted to bury me under. But I refused to be silent. Not because I want revenge, but because there are women right now sitting in shelters, walking through snow, trying to keep their babies warm, wondering if they matter. You do. You are not invisible. And the moment someone tries to erase your story, that's the moment you rise and tell it louder. She ended the video. There was no applause, no audience, just the sound of her own breath returning to her body. Though he placed a hand on her shoulder, eyes glassy. You didn't speak for yourself. You spoke for everyone. Hannah didn't reply. She just looked out the window. The next day, the video went live. By noon, it had over 1 million views. By evening, it had reached international news. She didn't check the comments. She didn't need to, because later that night, Jiho handed her something. A drawing he'd made at school. It was the 4 of them standing in front of a house. Hannah in the middle holding all their hands. He'd written 3 words above them in blocky, uneven handwriting, my hero mom. Her hands shook as she held it. Ariam peeked around the corner. Is it true? Are you famous now? Hannah smiled gently. No, baby. Just known. Is Appa in trouble? Jiho asked quietly. She hesitated. The truth is in the light now. That's all that matters. A few nights later, Miho appeared on the news again. This time alone. No Eugene. No legal team behind him. His company had suspended him pending internal review. His tone was carefully measured. Words like deep regret and misjudgment fell from his lips. But it was too late. People had seen enough. Hannah didn't celebrate. She simply turned off the TV and poured the children hot cocoa. That night, she wrote again. The truth doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need vengeance to be powerful. It just needs to be seen. And once it is, even the most carefully constructed lies begin to fall, but they did. Because Miho had filed a petition. He wanted partial custody. He had claimed it was to rebuild what was lost, to create a path forward. His lawyers called it reconciliation. The media called it redemption. But Hannah knew better. She knew manipulation when she saw it. And she saw it clearly in the way he had walked into the courtroom that morning. In his sharp, tailored suit, carrying a file of carefully selected photos, the image of a man trying to reclaim control of a narrative. She had tried to settle this quietly. But Miho didn't want peace. He wanted the appearance of peace. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a calm demeanor and tired eyes, called her name. Hannah stood. She moved to the front of the courtroom, nerves shaking through every inch of her, but her spine straight. She looked at the judge, then at Miho, who avoided her gaze, and finally back at her children, who sat still, holding each other's hands. "Ms. Seo," the judge began, "your former husband claims he is ready to be reintroduced into the children's lives, that he's stabilized and recognizes his role as a father. You oppose this request. Can you tell us why?" Hannah inhaled, and then she stepped into her truth. "My children have already been abandoned once," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "They waited by a Christmas tree for a father who never walked through the door. They slept on a bench in a train station while he ate in fine restaurants. They were erased from his press statements, from his life, and nearly from their own memories." The room was silent. "He says he wants to rebuild," she continued. "But rebuilding begins with acknowledgement, with showing up when no one is watching, with comforting a child when they're sick, not reading about it in a headline." Miho's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "And I'm not standing here out of bitterness," Hannah added. "I'm standing here because my children deserve peace. They deserve stability and healing, and a life where they don't question whether love is conditional." Her voice trembled now, not from fear, but from the weight of everything she'd carried alone. "I won't allow them to be used to fix a public image. I won't let their pain be rewritten again." She paused, turning to the judge, her eyes wet but steady. "I am not keeping them from their father. I am protecting them from a version of him that chose power over presence. And unless he's willing to become someone new, not for the world, but for them, they are safer where they are." The judge nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Seo." Miho was called next. He walked to the front with the posture of someone used to being believed. But today there was something different in the air. The judge looked at him carefully. "Mr. Seo, do you have anything to say in response?" Miho opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then he said, quietly, "I made mistakes." Hannah watched him closely. "I did what I thought was necessary," he continued. "For my company, for survival. I thought distance was cleaner, easier. I didn't understand what it would cost." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And do you understand that now?" He hesitated. "No," he admitted. "I don't think I fully do, but I want to. I want to be a father again." The judge was silent for a moment, studying him. Then she turned to Hannah. "Would the children be willing to speak privately in my chambers?" Hannah glanced back. Jiho nodded. Ariam stood slowly. Minjun, holding Dohi's hand, looked unsure, but followed. They disappeared behind a closed door. The minutes that passed felt like hours. Hannah sat still, hands clasped tightly, trying to imagine what her children might say, what pain might come out, or what hope might still remain. Then the door opened. The judge returned to the bench with a file in her hand, and she spoke. "I have heard from the children, and while this is not the space to share their words publicly, I will say this: they are thoughtful, resilient, and deeply protective of their mother." Miho looked down. The judge continued, "I believe reconciliation is possible in some families, but it cannot be forced, and it cannot begin while trust remains shattered." Pause. "Therefore, I am denying the request for shared custody at this time. Hannah exhaled for the first time in weeks. Mr. CO, the judge added, you may petition again in the future, pending demonstration of consistent, private efforts to rebuild trust, not for media or image, but for the emotional safety of your children. He nodded stiffly. The judge banged her gavel once. This session is concluded. As the courtroom began to clear, Miho stood frozen for a moment. Then slowly he approached her. Hannah, he said, his voice low, almost ashamed. I didn't think they'd say that. She turned to him, her voice tired but strong. They said what they've lived. You just never heard it until now. I want to make it right. Then start by not making it worse. Miho lowered his gaze. Do you think they'll ever forgive me? She looked over at Jiho, who was already walking toward the door without looking back. They don't owe you that, she said. But if you really want it, you'll earn it one day at a time. Quietly, gently, with no expectations. He nodded, barely, and then he walked away. Jisoo came to her side. You okay? She nodded, tears forming in her eyes, but this time not from sorrow. They chose peace, she said. They chose us. That night, in her notebook, she wrote, sometimes the most powerful voice in the room is not the loudest. Sometimes it's a child, telling the truth no adult had the courage to say. And in that truth we find healing. Hannah stood outside the shelter under a flickering street lamp, watching the snow drift past the warm breath that escaped her lips. The court hearing had ended hours ago, but its weight still clung to her skin, her breath, her thoughts. There had been no celebration, only relief, a kind of quiet that didn't come from winning, but from surviving. Behind her, laughter echoed faintly from the common room where Jiho, Aryam, and Minjun were drawing with Do-hee. They had asked for a movie night. Jiho said he wanted something funny, but safe. Hannah understood exactly what he meant. Safety had become a feeling they measured in moments, not in walls. She didn't notice Jisoo step up beside her until she felt his presence close and steady, like always. You're quiet, he said gently. I feel like I'm still in that courtroom, she whispered. He looked at her carefully. That wasn't just a hearing, Hannah. It was a reckoning. She gave a soft nod. I thought it would feel like justice, but it felt more like closure, like a door locking behind me. Maybe that's what you needed. I wanted them to feel heard, and they were, but it still hurts that I had to fight this hard for something so basic, just to protect them. You did more than protect them, Jisoo said. You taught them what love looks like when it's tested. She turned to him, her voice quiet. And now, he smiled softly. Now you rest. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted toward the night sky. There's something strange, she murmured. I'm more afraid of peace than I ever was of chaos. Because peace means you've stopped bracing for the next hit. And I don't know how to live like that yet. Jisoo stepped a little closer. Then let's figure it out. Slowly. Together. Her breath caught slightly at his words, but she said nothing. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep in a tangle of blankets and laughter-soaked exhaustion, Hannah sat in her room with her notebook open on her lap. She stared at the blank page, not sure what to write, but then her hand moved, almost on its own. Today, they chose me, not because I asked, not because I begged, but because they saw the truth. There's a power in being chosen by the people you love the most. Quiet, holy power. One that can't be taken by courts or cameras or men with clipped smiles. Minjun held my hand before the verdict. He said, even if they say we go with Appa, I'll hide and run back to you. And I knew in that moment I had already won. Because love that survives abandonment is the kind that never breaks. It bends. It weeps. But it stands. She closed the notebook and held it to her chest. She didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear, but from the unfamiliar quiet of knowing for once. There was no fire to put out. The next morning, the shelter felt different. Lighter. Yoonja, the shelter coordinator, found her in the hallway. There's someone asking to speak with you, she said, a hint of curiosity in her voice. He says it's personal. Hannah frowned. Who is it? I didn't catch his name, but he's not press. She walked carefully toward the small lobby, her heart thudding with old reflexes. Memories of surprise visitors that always brought bad news. But this time, when she turned the corner, she stopped in her tracks. It wasn't a man she recognized. It was an elderly gentleman in a charcoal wool coat, holding a thin box wrapped in faded paper. His hair was white, his hands thin but steady. "Ms. C.O. Hannah," he asked. "Yes." He stepped forward, bowed his head slightly. "I was once your father-in-law's lawyer, before he passed." Her brows drew together. He continued, "I handled several estate matters. Recently, while organizing archived files, I came across something unexpected." He offered the box. She didn't move. "It's a letter," he said, "from your former husband's father. It was never delivered." Her hand reached out slowly, uncertainly. She took the box and opened it. Inside was an envelope, old and slightly yellowed, with her name in a careful script. Her heart pounded as she opened it, her hands trembling. The letter was handwritten. "Hannah, if you're reading this, then perhaps the storm has already come. I never said this in life, but I always admired your strength. I saw what you did for my son, even when he forgot to see it himself. He is like me, driven, cold at times, too proud to ask for help. But you gave him warmth. You gave him a home. Should the day come when he forgets what truly matters, I ask you to remember this: you were never beneath him. You were the only thing keeping him upright. This family owes you a debt that cannot be repaid. But I hope someday you'll find the peace I never did. And if my words mean anything still, hold your head high, Hannah. You were always the heart of our home." Father C.O. She sat down on the nearest bench, the letter resting in her lap. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. The old man placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I thought you deserved to know someone saw you, even back then." She nodded, too full to speak. When he left, she remained there, holding the letter to her chest. Later, when Jiho found her sitting quietly, he climbed up beside her. "Are you okay, Amma?" She nodded, eyes shining. "Yes, for the first time, I think I am." It was almost spring now. The air had started to change. The wind no longer carried the bite of winter. It whispered something gentler, softer. The snow was melting along the curbs, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Hannah noticed color returning to the world. She and the children had moved into a small rented apartment. 2 bedrooms, thin walls, second floor of an old building near the school. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and it was home. That afternoon, Jiho was drawing at the kitchen table, Ariam was braiding her doll's hair with unmatched socks, and Minjun was sitting in Hannah's lap, holding her hand like a little anchor. They'd just finished lunch, steamed rice, kimchi, and a soup made with leftover vegetables. The kind of meal she never would have imagined serving back in the days of Miho's lavish dining tables. But the children ate every bite with laughter. Hannah, her phone buzzed with a message from Jisoo. She read it once, twice. "Can you come by the center later today? I want to show you something. And I think it might be time." Time, she didn't know what he meant, but his words lingered. Later that afternoon, with the kids at a play session hosted by the community group, Hannah made her way to the old church building that had been turned into a family resource center. The one Jisoo helped establish after her video gained national attention. He greeted her at the door, smile warm, eyes gentle as always. "Come with me," he said. He led her through the hallway and into a room she hadn't seen before. It was small, still under renovation, with sunlight pouring in through dusty windows. The scent of new paint and old hope hung in the air. "What is this place?" she asked. Jisoo handed her a folder. She opened it. Inside were blueprints, schedules, proposal, a name. The Hannah Project, a safe space for mothers in crisis. She blinked. What is this?" he smiled. "It's yours." She stared at him. "We've received enough donations from people inspired by your story," he said. "Not just to build this space, but to run it, staff it, and we want you to be the heart of it." Her hands trembled. "Jisoo, I don't know how to run anything." You've been running a life with 3 children, 1 pair of shoes, and nothing but your will to survive, he said. That's more than most CEOs. She laughed, covering her mouth, overwhelmed. I never asked for any of this. I know, he said softly, but that's what makes you the right person to lead it, because you won't do it for credit. You'll do it for the next woman sitting in the cold, wondering if she's invisible. She sank onto the edge of a dusty bench, holding the folder tightly. I'm scared, she whispered. You're allowed to be, he said, kneeling in front of her. But you don't have to do it alone. I'm here. Everyone is. Her eyes met his. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, tears slipped down her cheeks. Soft, slow, not from sorrow, but from awe. Will it really help them, she asked. Yes, he said without hesitation. It already is. She opened the folder again, and there it was, a photo of the outside of the center with a sign mock-up already designed. The Hannah Project. Her name, but not as a wound, as a beginning. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Hannah sat at the small kitchen table in the new apartment. The heater rattled softly in the corner, and she could hear the faint sound of a neighbor's TV through the wall. She opened her notebook, and she wrote today, someone gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost. Purpose. It isn't about being a symbol. It isn't about healing the world. It's about reaching out a hand and saying, I see you. I know you. I've been there. If we all did that just once, maybe fewer people would break in the dark. And maybe some of us would finally learn how to bloom. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the story? The small white sign was modest but radiant in the early morning light. The Hannah Project, a safe place to begin again. Hannah stood outside the center's doors, her fingers tracing the edges of the plaque. The spring air was cool, but not unkind. She wore a simple blouse and slacks, a far cry from the shivering woman in a hospital hallway or the broken mother at a courtroom bench. Her heart beat differently now, not with panic, but with presence. Behind her, the voices of her children floated like music, Minjun chasing Ariam around the yard while Jiho practiced riding his bike down the center path. It was real. It was theirs. Jisoo appeared beside her, carrying a box of notebooks for the welcome room. He paused when he saw her gaze fixed on the building. You okay? He asked. She nodded slowly. I didn't think I'd ever be on the other side of this. He set the box down and leaned beside her. You never left the fire, Hannah. You just learned how to walk through it. She let the silence linger for a moment, then turned to him gently. Can I ask you something? Anything. When you found me that day, at the train station, why did you help me? He smiled softly. Because you helped me first. Her brows drew together. When he chuckled. You don't remember, but back in university I failed an exam. I was going to drop out. You found me in the library, crying into a textbook, and sat beside me for hours helping me redo my notes. You never asked why I was crying. You just stayed. She blinked, her breath catching in her throat. You saved me that day, he said. So I just returned the favor. Her eyes shimmered, full. I didn't know. I didn't want you to, he said gently. Not until you believed in yourself again. Their eyes met, and in that moment, there was nothing else but truth. Deep, fragile, and warm. He looked down, then reached into his pocket. I've been carrying this, he said, handing her a small, square box. She stared at it. What is it? Something to remind you that beginnings don't have to be loud. They just have to be real. She opened it. Inside was a silver pendant. A small flame, simple and unpolished. Her fingers trembled as she held it. You lit something in this world, Hannah. For all of us, he said. You deserve to wear the spark that never went out. She swallowed the rising emotion and whispered, Thank you. Later that day, as the doors of the center opened for the first time, women began to walk in, timid, uncertain, like shadows looking for shelter. Hannah greeted each of them by name, with warmth, with quiet understanding. One woman, carrying a toddler and an oversized bag, hesitated at the door. Hannah stepped forward and extended her hand. You're safe here, she said. "Come inside." The woman's eyes filled, and she nodded. Hannah helped her in and led her to a seat. Then she turned back toward the hallway, where a small mirror hung beside the coat hooks. She paused there, looked at herself, not to check her reflection, but to see herself. For the first time in years, she truly did. No longer someone holding back tears. No longer the woman left behind. No longer just surviving. She was present. She was healing. She was whole. That evening, after the center had closed and the children were asleep in the apartment upstairs, Hannah sat at her tiny desk by the window. The city shimmered beyond the glass. No longer terrifying, no longer cold, just alive. She opened her notebook and wrote slowly, carefully, like someone placing stones to build something sacred today. I didn't fall apart. I didn't break. I didn't flinch. I stood in a room full of stories that looked like mine. And I opened the door. Healing doesn't come all at once. It creeps in quiet, hesitant, soft, like a friend sitting beside you in silence, reminding you that you're not alone. This is not the end of my story. It's the beginning of someone else's. And this time, I'm not just surviving it. I'm lighting the way. It had been months since the courtroom. Months since Hannah had faced Miho. Months since the world stopped spinning too fast beneath her feet. She was still learning how to breathe in peace. One warm afternoon, as golden light streamed into the community room, Jiho ran in holding a letter in his hand. His face flushed from the heat. "Amma, you got mail. It's real paper, not email." Hannah smiled as she wiped her hands on her apron. She took the envelope and froze. Her name, handwritten, in Miho's handwriting. She hadn't seen or heard from him since the custody hearing. No messages, no calls, no explanations. The letter trembled slightly in her hands. She sat on the edge of a small couch and opened it slowly, careful not to tear the paper. "Hannah, by the time you read this, I'll be gone from the company. They've voted to remove me. Investors pulled out. My face isn't welcome in the boardroom anymore. And maybe it never really belonged there in the first place. It's strange what you realize when you lose everything. I thought I lost my reputation, my control, my empire, but I lost something far greater before all of that. I lost you. I lost Jiho's quiet wisdom, Ariam's laughter, Minjun's sleepy eyes in the morning. And I can't ask for forgiveness. Not from you, not from them. But I needed to tell you. I see it now. Everything I missed. Everything I destroyed. I don't know where I go from here, but I hope wherever your story leads, it's somewhere bright, somewhere kind. You were always more than I could hold. And I pray I haven't ruined your ability to trust what's good. Thank you for carrying what I dropped." Miho, she finished reading and sat in silence. The room around her was filled with the distant sound of children playing, staff chatting, the hum of a coffee machine. Life went on. Life was going on. She folded the letter and stared out the window. Jiho came up beside her. "Was it from Appa?" he asked quietly. She looked down at him. "Yes." He bit his lip. What did he say? She considered how to answer. He said he's sorry, and that he finally understands. Jiho nodded slowly, then looked away. "Do you still love him?" The question pierced her. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled him close and rested her chin on the top of his head. "I loved the part of him that once tried," she whispered. "But I love you more. I love the life we've built, even through the ruins. That's what matters." He didn't speak, but he leaned into her, just a little tighter. That night, after the kids were asleep, Hannah sat at her desk with the letter in front of her. She didn't cry, not out of numbness, but because this time her tears weren't needed. She pulled out her notebook, the same one that had held every piece of her for the last year, and she wrote, "You can miss someone and still move forward. You can receive their apology without needing to carry them again. He wrote to me, not for attention, not for rescue, just to say the truth. And I received it with open hands and a closed door, because forgiveness is not a key to let someone back in. Sometimes, it's a light you carry as you walk further away." The following week, Hannah stood at the front of the Hannah Project's first story-sharing night. Women gathered in folding chairs, teacups clutched in nervous hands. Some had children in their laps. Some had bruises fading on their arms. Others carried invisible wounds still too deep to name. Hannah stepped forward. "Thank you for coming," she said gently. "I know what it costs to sit in this room, to tell the truth out loud, to say, 'This happened to me,' and believe you'll still be seen." She looked around the circle. "I want to begin with something that carried me when I had nothing else." She opened her notebook and read aloud the words she had once written through tears, through silence, through trembling. "I thought I was finished. But it turns out I was just beginning, and every ending I feared was just a door I needed the courage to close, so I could finally walk through the one meant for me." Silence filled the room. Then, one by one, hands reached for tissues, and hearts reached for each other. Healing had begun again, this time in more than just her. And far from the lights of old boardrooms and broken promises, Hannah finally stood where she was always meant to be. Not erased, not discarded, but restored. There were no garlands of gold, no glittering ornaments bought in expensive shops. But this year there was a tree, a small, second-hand pine tree, crooked at the base, decorated with paper stars the children had cut by hand, and ribbons made from old fabric scraps. Ariam had drawn little hearts on each one, writing names in crayon. Amma, Jiho, Minjun, Jisoo, Dohee. The apartment was warm, not because of expensive heating, but because the air was filled with laughter, cinnamon, soft music from the radio, the sound of healing settling into the corners.